Get busy loving or get busy dying. This post is going to be a marriage between spiritual philosophy and physical and mental health. It's not some half-baked platitude that wants to get a quick cheer. It's really an opportunity for a new way of seeing how we interact with ourselves and others that can only benefit your health, relationships, and work success. I want to start with a well-established spiritual concept that when we operate from the ego aspect of mind, we are on many levels operating in a world that is detrimental to ourselves and others by being closed off and acting from selfishness and scarcity. My personal understanding of the ego mind is that it is the component of our psyche that represents the raw animal, the mammal that we are. It wants to dominate and control in a scary predator world. We operate from it when we make fearful, angry, and selfish decisions. It's all about survival. It's the energy that hovers below courage to make the right but often more difficult choice in a given situation. But like I said, this isn't about spiritual tedium. This is how you can take this more esoteric concept and work with it practically to have a better life in every way. So let's start in the body. When we consider the systems of the body, they operate optimally when our nervous system is in state of rest and digest. We heal, relax, we are open. This is also known as the parasympathetic mode of the autonomic nervous system. When we are stressed, we spike to the sympathetic state of nervous system arousal. It's meant to be a short-term state that allows us to fight or flee, escape or be eaten. And if we live, then this short-term way of operation relaxes and we return to our parasympathetic state of being. It could be said then that our higher and more abundant and loving selves are reflected in our parasympathetic state, and when we act through ego, through fear, anger, possessiveness, and manipulation, there is a reflection of this in our bodies. As we engage our more predatory, animalistic, and sympathetic side. But in the world of sales, and the modern Western world as a whole, our triggers into egoic or sympathetic arousal are etheric and conceptual, and far more numerous than they were in an era in which the ego and nervous system were designed for. And so it is that fight or flight is no longer a fleeting occasional state, but our normal mode of existence. As a restful state giving out endorphins is replaced with cortisol and adrenaline in fight or flight activation, our bodily chemistry becomes toxic, which is okay for short bouts of fleeing from a tiger. But when it's out of norm, it is the pathway to ill health and chronic disease. This was first brought to light 70 years ago in the research of Hans Selye and revealed to the world in his book, The Stress of Life, where he discovered that after a period of enduring chronic sympathetic activation, the human body reaches an exhaustive stage, which can contribute to various illnesses, including ulcers, high blood pressure, and heart disease, by weakening the body over time. So with threat being a myriad of concepts from war on the news, the newest pandemic, the rise in interest rates, the low lead flow, the prospect that ghosted us, we have become accustomed to see a world of threat and abide with the corresponding nervous system arousal. But this isn't new knowledge. We have all heard of the fight or flight and how modern living is stressful and that stress is the silent killer. But what I want to do is offer a unique perspective and intervention that could quite possibly allow you to get busy loving rather than get busy dying through stress. You could apply my idea to any stressful areas of our lives, but because we are salespeople and much of our stress comes from our dealings with other people, I want to focus there. So issues in our lives often have a physical, emotional, and mental component. A prospect ghosts us. We create a mental representation of them and the situation and have an emotive response which shows up in our physiology. So one could argue if we don't want our physiology to trigger, we can change our mental process to the situation. And each time that an old mental pattern that would have triggered this emotive and sympathetic response of anger and fear leading to chronic activation can be intercepted, we can operate from a less aroused space and not invite the chronic health issues associated with perpetual activation. But how? I hear you say, "Get to the bloody point, Jimmy." The first thing we need to realize is that as soon as someone's behavior or actions has hit our senses, what we process and how we respond has nothing to do with the person outside of ourselves. Our senses have now created for us an internal representation of the problem, person or situation, and reactance is no longer toward the person, but toward our internal perception. Now we begin to go down the rabbit hole. This seems trite, but when you think about how us humans are so good at carrying resentments and grudges, it becomes more apparent as we apply time frames. We have that guy who ghosted us last week. The image pops in our minds, and we get a rush of annoyance or anger, and now we slip into activation. Meanwhile, the guy is 1,000 miles away having Rice Krispies and a coffee in his house, oblivious and totally unassociated with our little internal game. In fact, the more time we apply, the more ridiculous it becomes. Think of the ex-wife or husband who still hates the ex for what they did and stewed on it for the last 20 years. Who is this resentment really hurting? I would like to postulate that as time goes by, we begin to carry more and more of these unresolved trespasses against our good selves, to the extent that the ego, which 1,000 years ago would never have had so many interactions, is now doing its thing. But in overdrive mode. Consider a farmhand 1,000 years ago. He may only have ever met 50 people and resented 2 or 3. That's okay. You can handle that and probably live out a fairly non-activated life. But nowadays, the ego is scooping up enemies and bad guys and backsliders like there's no tomorrow. In meditation, I saw how the ego forms what Eckhart Tolle calls a pain body. I saw a vision of a great disc floating in blackness, supported by an almost endless line of people, all acting as little pillars keeping this body of resentment propped up and alive in our psyches. If you are catching my drift so far, what I am saying is that although we may feel fully entitled to carry these resentments, be they big or small, they all contribute to an enormous psychic millstone that we carry about with us at all times. This in turn causes a feeling of having an enemy on every street corner as endless mental images of past wrongdoers pass through our conveyor belt of thoughts in our wild monkey minds. So I wish to propose the idea here that it is not the modern world that causes our descent into our chronic sympathetic activation and related health issues, but it's how we perceive wrongdoers and wrongdoing around us using an aspect of mind, namely the ego, that has literally been driven crazy because it can't cope with the volume of interactions it needs to process and store in its vast filing cabinet of naughty people A to Z. So, there is light at the end of the tunnel, changing our thoughts and changing our life, as Wayne Dyer said. But here's the thing. We feel so entitled to these resentments because we really believe that they were wrong to do what they did. But here's the thing. The ego isn't the smartest of mental creations. It loves to jump to conclusions, make assumptions because it likes to be right, angry, fearful. It adds its own little story into the mix to make the resentment stick. Consider this, the guy eating his Rice Krispies. Yes, that backsliding bastard that was all set to go was sending us all the buying signals. And then just as your Zoom call time came, his malevolent plan of turning off all his devices and disappearing down the pub kicked in, leaving you high and dry, right? We need to fuel our anger with a story that allows us to go all in. The ego feeds and gorges on these low-level emotions, so it cooks up a story that maximizes them. In reality, Mr. Rice Krispies has a pregnant wife who rang him 20 minutes before your call with severe back pain, so he had to split and hasn't got replied. Because your email is under a mountain of other crap he has going on after having to take a day off to look after his pregnant wife. I'm trying to add a bit of humor here, but the point is real. Each one of those little mental images you hold about all of those naughty people are between 98 to 99%, all just made up by your drama queen of an ego. Really analyze what you actually know about that person, their world, the full circumstances of the event from a more global place, and you will come to realize most of what you think to be true is just an internal story that you concocted to make your resentment viable. So, to that end, the pain body that you drag about with you is pretty much all made up. And your view of the world as a world of backsliders and wrongdoers is your version of the world and yours alone. So, if you want to change, you can pick through every grievance you ever had, but it may take the rest of your life. I'd recommend that you pick a big one, the stinker of the lot. Ask yourself, what do you really know about that person, their history? What brought them to that time in their life? when they did what they did, what their exact thought pattern and intent was. And I think you will find that you know very little and had to manufacture a lot just to keep your grievance alive. Once you have picked apart the biggies, you will begin to see patterns as how your ego mind will take a situation like a late-paying client and create a story. You are now in the powerful position of seeing the ego mind doing its thing and no longer enmeshed in its little game. If you thought this post wasn't wild enough, I want to take things a little further. That little internal image that we choose to attack as our own internal representation of the scoundrel we purport it to be is nothing more than an image within our psyche. So by attacking it, we attack ourselves. One could compare it to drawing a picture of the offender on your hand and stabbing it. Who suffers? All of the hateful energy, the adrenaline and cortisol is being dumped into our body. So why not choose to love that image instead? Bring peace into your nervous system. Hear me out here. The past is past, and Mr. Rice Krispies is 1,000 miles away now, on his way to work, stuck in traffic on the freeway. You're not loving him and condoning his actions. You are setting yourself free from an internal mechanism that is making you ill. That is all. If you do enough contemplation on this, you begin to see that in the present moment there is the life we really want. Free from a world what Churchill called one damn thing after another, and you will begin to see that resentment and anger toward others really is setting yourself on fire, hoping that the other person chokes on the smoke. Our jingly-jangly bag of resentments is just a mental construct. In fact, almost all of our problems are just stories we tell ourselves about the past and scenarios concocted about the future that will never occur. You can't touch any of them. They just linger in the corner of your mind. They aren't real. There is peace in that realization. I wish this peace for you because in doing so I get the peace too. Everyone wins. If this resonated, I have a free training on letting go of grievances. It's given from an open heart from me to you. Peace, brothers and sisters.